All right, our 30-second thing didn't work this time for whatever reason, but that's all right. You got some technical difficulties. But anyway, what's up, Spartan Nation? Welcome to another episode of the Spartan Nation Podcast with your host here, Matt Lonsberry, and my co-host, Aiden Mulcrone. It has been a couple, 2 or 3 weeks since we've done a podcast, just because it's a slower time of year. Plus, I went on vacation recently. I went to Colorado for about a week and visited a lot of the sites. There's plenty to do in Colorado with the mountains and all of that jazz. So it was a good trip. And I went to Boulder and got to see the University of Colorado. Mel Tucker's old. He was there for like an hour, but got to see his old residence there at Boulder. And there's a lot of excitement, obviously, with Dion coming in his first season with the Buffs, and went to Rocky Mountain National Park. I had never been to Colorado before, so we tried to pack as much into a week as we could. But now we're back, and I wanted to talk some football recruiting. And like I said, it had been a couple weeks since we did a pod, so we figured it was definitely time. So with that, we're jump right in. Big weekend coming up for Michigan State football. I would argue probably their biggest weekend of the officials visit season, which began at the beginning of June. They've got 5-star defensive lineman David Stone coming in, 4-star wide receiver Nick Marsh, who was once a Michigan State commit, and reopened things. He's down to kind of Michigan State, Penn State, Kansas, which is kind of a surprise addition to his like top group. And there's been rumblings about Pittsburgh, but most people kind of think this is coming down to like a Michigan State Penn State battle. We'll see what happens with him. He's visiting this weekend, and he's got a commitment scheduled for July 7th. 4-star running back Jason Brown is going to be on campus. That's another big visit for Michigan State. Ephraim Reed with a chance to add some big time talent to Michigan State's running back room, which that's a position that they've brought in transfers for the last like kind of throughout Mel Tucker's tenure. It's been more transfer backs than homegrown talent, and so that's a chance to land a guy. Interior offensive lineman DeAndre Carter, a 4-star kid. He's going to be on campus this week. A couple other offensive linemen who Michigan State is in pretty good standing with. So just a big weekend for recruiting coming up, starting on Friday. Aiden, kind of what your thoughts on like the weekend as a whole, and what Michigan State needs to do here to continue to build some momentum in this 24 class.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an article earlier this week about that, and kind of a little bit of what I left out was just, they did get these 2 commits. They did get Cam Campbell and Reggie Powers, but they still have the fewest commits in the Big Ten this cycle so far. And yeah, definitely trying to lock in on some guys this weekend. Obviously, David Stone's going to be the big one that people are going to talk about. I did say, Oklahoma does seem to be the team to beat.
Right.
And, we did talk about, earlier this year about Zadavian Sims, who was considering MSU going to Oregon. So Oregon is now kind of in play for Stone as well as a team like Miami. But I really think MSU probably beats out Miami right now. But yeah, Oregon and Oklahoma are kind of, in the hunt in terms of like the top 3 would be MSU, Oklahoma, Oregon. And then, yeah, for Jason Brown, I think that would be a big pull. He's a West Coast guy out of Washington. So, not really hotbed or kind of area that MSU recruits a ton. So that would be kind of an interesting to see, how he reacts in terms of, the environment at MSU. And, obviously Washington, big time program, in his home state. He's coming to East Lansing this year, and, MSU went out there last year. So he may have a little bit of an idea of MSU already. So yeah, I mean that those two are the big recruits, but me personally, I'm not banking on them as the like end all be all for this recruiting class, but they would definitely boost this class a ton. But I did say Nick Marsh was definitely the one to land
Yeah,
for this not even this cycle, but just this weekend in general.
sure.
To be the player you want to get. Keeping that in-state talent is huge. Keeping those relationships just in Michigan in general is a big deal for recruiting, just for all schools. So when you lose a kid to a Penn State and out of state team, that definitely hurts recruiting and kind of the value of your brand, even if it's in state. So Marsh is definitely, for me personally, I would say he'd be a top priority or top target for
Yeah,
this weekend. But yeah, I think this weekend definitely the biggest one so far in terms of just the star talent coming in, but in terms of, you really got to end June on a high note and, end June, better than it started.
sure, sure. No, and I agree with you. I mean, we want to keep you want to keep expectations realistic,
Hmm.
and by a lot of accounts, Michigan State is behind with David Stone. Now, I do think it's encouraging that they're getting kind of that last weekend of June with him, because there was a lot of buzz earlier about 2, 3, 4 months ago with David Stone. Just Michigan State was, I would say, neck and neck right there with Oklahoma, and a couple of these other schools. And for the last few weeks, it seemed like a lot of that buzz had kind of died down a little bit. We know that Michigan State lost, or not really lost, but like um, Brandon Jordan, pass rush specialist, he was very involved in Stone's recruitment, and he's off to the NFL in Seattle now. And Marco Coleman, the defensive line coach, he goes back to his alma mater at Georgia Tech, and Michigan State brings in Dyron Reynolds from Stanford to try to just be that new D line coach, and he brings some recruiting chops, and he brings a technical, just an understanding of the position, and by all accounts, he's a very good teacher of the position. And so it took some time for Reynolds to pick up the pieces that were left behind by Coleman and Jordan to decide, okay, which of these guys fit what we want to do here. But so it is encouraging to see Stone just show some enthusiasm and excitement about visiting Michigan State again. But again, we do need to keep some expectations in check, and understand that Michigan State has some ground to make up here, and we'll see what happens. Brown's recruitment's been pretty quiet. It doesn't seem like he's a big flash guy. I don't. I didn't check this today, but it doesn't seem like he has any other official visits right now lined up, and so Michigan State's kind of getting his first, at least over the summer. He might take some more this fall once the season starts. Different guys have different timelines with their recruitments, and then, but yeah, Nick Marsh is a guy who I agree with you. He should be priority number one. Number one, it's a position of need now for Michigan State with Keon Coleman transferring out, and he was probably going to be off to the NFL after this year anyway. And that's just a position that if you can bring in a top 100 kid like Marsh, um, he's a guy who figures to be plugged in immediately, and you can really get like 3, maybe 4 solid years out of him. And so he's a high priority in-state kid, as you mentioned. Penn State has done a pretty good job in recent cycles of coming into Detroit and snagging some kids that Michigan and Michigan State were both interested in. And so
Right.
trying to cut off that pipeline a little bit and take a better ownership of Detroit, that's a big deal, and that plays in with Marsh as well. So yeah, this is definitely just a weekend to watch. And on top of, I think there's like 7 guys who are like officially um, like well known that are coming in. There's Stone, the 5-star. There's a trio of 4-star guys in Marsh, Brown, and DeAndre Carter, and then there's twin offensive lineman Mercer. Is it Lewinsky? Is that?
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
how
I
to
don't.
I
I've
don't know
got it
how to
right here.
pronounce it.
I can pull it up. Lewinsky, it's pretty close. I might be.
Yeah.
And then Charlton, Lewinsky, they're twins. They're both coming in, 3-star guys. But again, Michigan State has shown under Kaplovich an ability to take some of these 3-star guys and develop them into good rotational pieces. And then kind of an interesting guy in Justin Denson. He's a corner from Rhode Island, who his recruitment has been. He's kind of flown under the radar for a lot of his recruitment. But he recently released the top 5. I don't have that in front of me, like who those teams are. I can pull it up here real quick. But his top 5 include Florida, Oklahoma. I think Alabama might have been one of those teams in there. And Michigan State's considered, one of the perhaps front runners for him, a good athlete. And so there's kind of a wide net of visitors coming in this week. And then also there's some rumblings that there might be some quote unquote surprise visitors who aren't like officially like on the list of official visitors, but like once they are on the ground in East Lansing, then we're going to find out about some of these other kids. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're committed to another school. And so, you don't want to be broadcasting, hey, I'm going to go check out this. I'm going to go check out Michigan State while I'm committed to, and that goes on a bunch of recruiting nowadays. But there's just some underlying politics there, and so we'll find out. I think this number 7 is expected to grow into either 9 or 10 guys on campus this week. One of those guys I'm curious about, who could be like they're a 5-star corner, Charles Lester. He kind of made a surprise visit to Michigan State midweek, and he spent a day and a night on campus. He did the kind of the tour of campus with Mel Tucker. I don't know what that thing's called that they've been driving around.
Yeah, the
Uh,
slingshot.
the slingshot, yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
3-wheeler, like a
Hmm.
backwards 3-wheeler. And Mel Tucker's been taking recruits out on that, and it looked like Lester was enjoying his time in East Lansing too. So maybe he's one of those guys who came up for the unofficial visit midweek, and maybe they convinced him to hang around for a couple extra days and meet some of these other talented guys that are coming in. That would be a nice development. Again, reasonable expectations. Florida State is kind of the front runner for Charles Lester, who's this 5-star corner who was visiting midweek. But again, we've seen a little bit of momentum increase with Michigan State football recruiting with the commitment of Reggie Bowers and Cameron Campbell. The class is up to 5 now. They entered the month with only 3 guys, and you add a couple of talented. I think the Reggie Powers one, even though he's a 3-star guy, just the fact that he's a 3-star from Ohio, just the type of kid who we would have seen brought in under the previous regime, an overlooked guy. Ohio State was kind of in on his recruitment, but they were kind of half, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because they Ohio State recruit nationally, and so. And those are the kind of guys that Mark D'Antonio thrived with, guys who those halfway in with, well, Ohio State's kind of keeping them on the leash just in case they need to add a guy, but he's not really a priority. And Mark D'Antonio just jumped at those guys and said, hey, you're a priority here. Come to East Lansing, and then let's go beat these guys on the field in 3 or 4 months. So, and that's what I think that's been missing. A missing part of the Mel Tucker era is that Ohio recruiting. I'll speak to that a little bit, Aiden, your perspective maybe on that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think if I remember correctly, the 2021 class had 2 players from Ohio. I think it was AJ Kirk and Michael Gravely, and uh they're both already off the roster. 2022, there weren't any players from Cal or from Ohio. There were a lot of players from Georgia, California, Florida, and then this cycle, going back to Ohio, I think we've seen that a lot more now. I think they've been recruiting a lot more guys and just kind of getting their foot back in the door with Ohio, just with the state in general. I know they've kind of swung and missed on some guys already for this class just in Ohio alone. What brings to mind is I can't remember the guy's name, but the quarterback that just committed to Penn State, he was being recruited pretty. I think his name is Grunkmeyer, being recruited pretty heavily by MSU and then end up choosing Penn State. Uh, there's some other quarterbacks from Ohio that MSU is recruiting for 2025 as well. So, yeah, just getting back in Ohio, I think Reggie Powers is a big time commitment in that
Yep.
sense, and just as a player in general, I think he could be, another player that is flying under the radar that MSU has found. I know everyone on staff and the players are really high on um what's it, Malik Spencer. Sorry, I just blanked
Yes.
right there. But yeah, he was a 3-star guy from Buford, which is a powerhouse program in Georgia. And
Right.
he was just kind of a 3-star guy because he's surrounded by a bunch of 4 and 5-star players, and he kind of flew under the radar, and everyone's super high on him and really think he's going to have a breakout season. I mean, Jaden Mangum was a 4-star guy, but he really wasn't, his recruitment wasn't super heavy with, a school, like Penn State. They weren't, as big of a factor as, they were with some other players in the Detroit area. So I mean, just in that sense, recruiting those guys, I think, you mentioned it about the running backs in terms of how, since Mel Tucker got here, that they've been bringing in a lot of guys from the portal and, not a lot of homegrown guys and, incoming freshmen. And I think we're going to see that really this year with the DBs and the safeties, is a lot of those guys that are going to play are all guys who came in out of high school and were homegrown, kind of built within the program. You see, Mangum, Spencer, Dylan Tatum, uh, Caleb Coley, Charles Brantley, even Angelo Gross. I know he was recruited by D'Antonio to come in under the D'Antonio regime, but he stayed throughout. So I think all those guys, really we'll start to see what this coaching staff, how they can really develop this season defensively. And I think that's going to really reflect on how it impacts their recruiting too. So once recruits start to see, hey, these guys who got developed from, who came in during high school, got developed and, became, all conference players, or maybe were, got an NFL contract somewhere down the line, that's really going to start to boost their recruiting within the 25 class and, moving forward.
Yeah, I think we've seen a shift in philosophy in Michigan State's football recruiting too, and that's a lot of that comes from the fact that Saeed Khalif was the previous recruiting director, and now his contract wasn't renewed, and now Mark DeThorne is the new guy kind of running the recruiting operations for Michigan State, and it seems like, and there's probably multiple reasons for this. Number one, last summer Michigan State's coming off of an 11-2 season. They kind of burst onto the scene, caught a lot of people by surprise with those 11 wins, winning a New Year's Six Bowl, and so it was a lot louder. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just think that you're utilizing the momentum, the sudden momentum that you've got from a great season, and you're bringing in a lot of, handful of 5-star guys and a lot of 4-star guys, and it was a lot of fun during. When the problem was Michigan State didn't land a lot of those guys. They got them on campus, and it created a lot of buzz. And they did, I think, land 8 or 9 4-star guys. So I don't want to take away too much from the previous recruiting class, because it was one of the better ones that we've seen at Michigan State. But then you go 5 and 7. A lot of those things don't sell the same way. Like, you can't be as braggadocious because those were, and I don't know that they really even care about what other people are saying, but there's just a level of getting back to the grind, I guess, maybe. And a lot of programs, you do have to build way up to start to win those bigger major recruitments. And I'm not even getting into like NIL or that kind of thing right now. I'm just talking like results on the field and filling out a lot of roster. You have to with 3-star guys, and you can win with those guys. Coach D'Antonio proved that Michigan State can be successful on the field with a lot of those overlooked players. And then in 2016 rolls around, and D'Antonio kind of cast a wider net and brought in some more talented guy. Now that didn't really work out from that class, just because there was some bad eggs in that class. There's no other way to put it, but that's kind of the natural progression. That's my point, though. Michigan State needs to get back to winning season in the field, getting back to 7, 8, 9 wins, being a factor in the Big Ten again. And then you can start to sell these bigger name guys. Hey, you can come here and you can be an absolute stud here. You'll get lost in the shuffle at Alabama. You'll get lost in the shuffle at Georgia, or wherever, Ohio State. But you can come here and you can be a day one contributor on the field. We know that Mel Tucker and the staff that he's assembled has some recruiting chops. You don't bring in the classes that they did the last 2 years without having those recruiting chops. Now it's just got to be kind of reinforcing the idea that Michigan State's heading in the right direction, and you do that by getting back on the field and getting back to a bowl game and all those things, and going from there. Yeah, so we'll be watching very closely this weekend, following along on Twitter, seeing how things are going. On the lookout for commitments from whoever. I mean, like I said, Nick Marsh is a guy who already has his commitment scheduled for July 7th. Maybe Michigan State just blows it out of the park, this weekend, and he's ready to make his decision right away. That's something that could happen. This is his last official before he's making that decision. So yeah, we'll be watching for all kinds of things like that. Is there any other maybe guys who visited previously, Aiden, this month that you're kind of looking at to be, like if I did like a top 3 or 5 guys who might be Michigan State's next commitment, do you have any of those names in mind?
Yeah, I have a couple. So my
Okay.
first one, I think I don't know if you mentioned him already, but Henry Hasselback,
Right.
obviously son of Matt Hasselback, quarterback. MSU doesn't have a QB for this class yet, so I think that would be a big time commitment. Just obviously you want to have a QB for every single class. MSU did get Caden Hauser and Sam Levitt the last 2 classes, who were both 4-star guys, but you always want to have a quarterback every single class. So no matter what, just get a guy who will come in and compete at least for the job. Just not, they're not selling him, just come in and be a backup for whatever, one of the 2 4-stars that don't work out. They want him to come in and compete for the starting job. So obviously, he took his official visit, and then he actually came back. I think it was a week or 2 weeks after. He didn't come with his mom the first time, so he wanted to
Right.
bring his mom and take a second visit. I think another player who people might not know a ton about is wide receiver Syer Torrance.
Yeah.
He's out of Syracuse, New York. So he's been a guy that I think he was on the same official weekend as like Reggie Powers and Cam Campbell.
Yep. He was.
So I think, yeah, and I think they have both tweeted at him to come join MSU, and I think the recruits around him who took visits with him like him, and they've been recruiting him, and I think the coaching staff has definitely been high on him. I think it's safe to say that I trust Courtney Hawkins' judgment with with recruiting for how well he's done in pretty much every single cycle with, players and just developing guys who were already here, like Trey Mosley, just Jaden Reed too. We'll see this year how that 2022 class is going to be with Jerron Glover and Antonio Gates, and losing Keon Coleman. But I think so far in the first 3 seasons with Courtney Hawkins as the wide receivers coach, he's done a really good job. And I think, the way he's been recruiting, I think, Sire Torrance could be another guy that he lands that could, again, we talk about, another guy that's a 3-star that might be flying under the radar.
Right. To add a couple names to the guys you already mentioned, and I like where you went with that. But Quasi Gilmer is a 4-star
Hmm.
wide receiver. He visited back the first weekend of June. 4-star kid out of Sierra Canyon, California, and I had heard like it's kind of some message board stuff, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But like he might be down to like a UCLA and Michigan State are kind of the two who have kind of risen for him, and he may be deciding between those two, which is interesting. I mean, he's a California kid, so that you understand the UCLA connection there, but also with UCLA being set to join the Big Ten pretty soon too, just an interesting dynamic there. To your point about Hawkins, though, another pretty high caliber kid that he's in the running for. He's a name to watch. Another one would be Dylan Williams, the 4-star linebacker. Again, he also visited that first weekend in June. I can't remember off the top of my head who. I remember seeing, Williams being listed as one of those guys who might be down to 2 or 3 schools, and Michigan State was one of them. I can't remember off the top of my head like who else was involved there. But yeah, another couple of guys who it'd be interesting to see kind of how those things develop. Um, what's your overall sense now that we're 4 weeks into June or in the fourth week of June? Where's your sense of where this class is at right now? I know they only have five commits, which is a lower number. You'd like that to be up in the 8-9 range. But with the guys that seem like Michigan State seems to be near the top with, what's your overall sense of where the class is at right now, Aiden?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of the guys who are already committed, I think it's obvious they're trying to grow the class as well. I know AJ Dennis is on campus again. I think he's been on campus every weekend in June, just recruiting and, being around guys and trying to get, yeah, just trying to get guys to commit to MSU and come play with him. And I think there's a good amount of just camaraderie and, you know, kind of the want to be there with a lot of the guys who are already committed and just trying to sell, other recruits on MSU. I know someone just mentioned Anthony Carey in the comments.
Yep.
He's another running back who, is considering MSU pretty highly. I think the other two schools that are really in the running for him are North Carolina and South Carolina,
Yep.
along with
Oklahoma's
MSU.
involved there too.
Yeah, so I think he's another dude that a lot of the current recruits are starting to go after and just bring them in. I think the current commits do, you know, they might not follow everything on 24/7, but they do understand that it currently is a smaller class than a lot of the other schools. So I think that's a big thing. But we talked about having back-to-back top 25 classes and how could they get to a third. And I think, pretty much all of the guys we just mentioned, the last 4 or 5 guys we just mentioned really have to commit to help, grow this class. And
Right.
there is some star power, left on the board. Dylan Williams is a high 4-star. Anthony Carey's still a 4-star guy. So just getting that to get to that top 25 class. Because yeah, because like you said last time, kind of just yeah, like what D'Antonio did with bringing in those 3-star recruits, he showed it worked, but at the end, it really wasn't sustainable for a long
Right.
period of time. It worked for a good 5-6 years, but then you have that one bad class, and then you try to build that with some more 3-star classes, and it kind of just fell through. But what Coach Tucker has learned, coaching at LSU, Alabama, Georgia, is having that sustainability. It works by having top tier recruits and having those top 25 classes. And I think we'll see this year, having back-to-back top 25 classes, that this team will improve from 5-7. And then, building off that, having another, right now, top 25 doesn't seem super realistic, but having at least like a top 30 will show, the growth in the program. And I do want to say quickly, one more player that I think is key for MSU this cycle is Jeremiah Beasley, out of the
Yeah.
linebacker out of Belleville. I know MSU has been it's been on and off in terms of what we've seen from the outside, and trying to just get him on campus for an official visit was kind of yeah, they kind of stretched it out a little longer than they wanted to, but they did get him on campus, and I know U of M has been recruiting him pretty hard. So yeah, I think he's another player that MSU really has to win, just to yeah, get back in that kind of top 25 race, and just kind of get back on their feet and grow this class out to, you know, 20 guys. Because last year, I think what they had 19 or 20 recruits. So it's really just building off that, and filling out that class with 25 guys. Because ideally, you want to have more high school guys and
Yeah.
fewer transfer portal to really build this program in general.
Right. To answer Kyle's question, and we appreciate the question, Kyle, and you're one of the guys who has been kind of following us since day one, and we appreciate that. But to answer Kyle's question, I don't think Anthony Carey has a set announcement date right now. Now that his recruitment definitely has gained some buzz over the last couple of weeks. Cameron Campbell, who's a recent commit of Michigan State, he specifically mentioned that he was, going after Anthony Carey and trying to secure his commitment for Michigan State. So yeah, that's definitely one that is worth keeping an eye on, but there's no set commitment date for him at this time. Going back to your point about D'Antonio and the 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 not sustainable part of the way he recruited, I think a big part of that was the Big Ten changed in the middle of
Mhm.
D'Antonio's tenure. I'm not saying this to take anything away from Mark D'Antonio, because he did win 3 Big Ten championships at Michigan State. And I think the last one of those in 2015, that was a couple of years into this shift that we saw in the Big Ten. But the Big Ten changed when Urban Meyer came to Ohio State.
Mhm.
Um, he Ohio State instantly became like as good as they were under Jim Tressel. They took the bigger step forward under Urban Meyer, because that's just as good of a coach that Urban was, and bringing that SEC relentless, not to do Mel Tucker's one of his call signs, but he just brought a relentlessness to recruiting, where there used to be like this gentleman's agreement amongst Big Ten coaches that, once a kid's committed to a fellow Big Ten school, you stop recruiting them, and you just, and then Urban Meyer said, "The heck with that, we're going to recruit everybody until their name is on the dotted line." That sounds like such a simple thing, and nowadays, but back then it was a real deal, that it was just a gentleman's agreement that you didn't recruit guys who were committed elsewhere. And so the Big Ten got better, is my point. Once Urban Meyer came in, and credit Mark D'Antonio, Michigan State had about as much success against Ohio State and Urban Meyer as I think more success than anybody at in the height of his tenure. But it was back to your point about being unsustainable. It's just so difficult where the Big Ten is at now uh, to continue to be in the upper echelon over and over again when you're, I don't want to say settling for 3-star guys, but when that's kind of your recruiting ceiling.
Hmm.
And so when Mel Tucker comes in, that wasn't his mindset. His mindset was, no, we're gonna throw our hat in the ring with some of the best players in the country, and we've seen that reflected in these last two recruiting classes that did finish top 25. I think 2 years ago there was 5 4-star guys in that recruiting class, and that was more than the previous 3 classes combined. And then last year's class has 8 or 9 4-star guys, and so we're seeing that like there's more upper echelon talent coming to Michigan State under Tucker than we've seen previously. I think the the goal is to marry that, 6 7 8 4-star guys in a class, but then fleshing it out more with the other
Hmm.
3-star guys like a Reggie Powers, like a going back years, the Darquez Denard, who's an underlooked guy. Like you want to have those classes that do have um, a, a good group of 4-star guys, but you still end up with 25 to 30, depending on the year, how many guys you need,
Right.
and filling it out some more. And so we'll see with um, how Mel Tucker and his staff is able to do that. With that shift, the Big Ten is going to change very quickly again here, and
Hmm.
and we'll shift into the next topic that we wanted to talk about, which was these future schedules that the Big Ten, or at least future opponents that the Big Ten announced for its conference members once USC and UCLA join the conference in 2024. This is like a week or so old. Like, and again, we did a podcast last week because I was on vacation in Colorado, and so I enjoy looking at future schedules. It's just because I'm a college football junkie, but I wanted to do that for Michigan State, and so we'll shift gears a little bit. Before we do that, I'm going to give a quick scroll through the comments, see if there are any other questions. Cameron's another one of our very loyal followers and listeners, so we appreciate that, Cameron. Um, will Michigan State ever have that kind of run again? I think it's possible. Now, again, this kind of bleeds into our next topic as far as the Big Ten's gonna get tougher. Like USC is as down as that program has been over a vast majority of the last decade and a half, maybe even longer. With Lincoln Riley there, like they look like they're going to be a perennial power nationally for the foreseeable future as long as he's there. And UCLA has that's kind of a strange program. Like I thought UCLA as a program that um, historically has been an underachiever just because they are in that kind of a recruiting hotbed with Southern California, but they've kind of always been overshadowed by USC on the football field. But Chip Kelly's done a pretty good job there too, and so that's another program that um, is upper to mid tier who you're going to have to deal with on a maybe not an annual basis, but on a biannual or once every 2 or 3 years type of thing. And so it's getting tougher. And so to answer the question, it's going to be challenging for Michigan State to see like they won the Big Ten in 15, 13, and 10. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so like that's 3 championships in a over a 6 year stretch. That was impressive. It's gonna be hard to do that in the modern day Big Ten just because of UCLA, more so USC. Michigan's gotten his act together finally after a couple of decades of just being mostly mediocre. Ohio State's not going away. Uh, Penn State, I like to make fun of James Franklin a little bit, but at the same time, that's still a program that you have to deal with year in and year out. It's going to be tough to answer Cameron's question. Let's see. Yeah, I think we can shift gears. So let's talk about the upcoming future opponents for Michigan State. And I don't know if you have the 2024 schedule pulled up, Aiden, but if you don't, I'll give you a chance to do that, and then we'll talk about it. But yeah, so as far as this 24 schedule, it's going to look very similar to what we've seen out of Michigan State for the last how many years it's been since the East Division was established, because um, you've got Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Those are your three biggest opponents that have been traditionally your Big Ten East division opponents. They're all on the schedule again. And then like your crossover opponents are Nebraska, Illinois, and who's the last one? Purdue. So like
Yeah.
it's very much, even though divisions are going away in 2024 once USC and UCLA join, it still sets up very much the way that the previous several seasons have set up with East Division, West Division. So not a ton of change there. You've got home games against just in conference Indiana, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, and Ohio State. Those are your home Big Ten games, and then you go on the road against Maryland, Michigan, Nebraska, and Penn State. You and I have talked about this a little bit, just how difficult this 2023 schedule is for Michigan State, and we've shared our expectations. Kind of like the baseline expectation, I think, for both of us is about 6-6, get back to a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
And with the idea of being okay, that generates some positive momentum again, and then it sets up for a chance in 2024 to make some more noise. Looking at this 24 schedule, how do you feel about that timeline, just in general, as when you look at the schedule?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the schedule, obviously it doesn't seem like it's changing that much. I think they're only trading like, I mean, they've played Purdue they played Purdue in 2021. They played Illinois last season. They play Nebraska this year. So it's really, some familiar opponents. I know Purdue just went through a coaching change and Nebraska is too. So, we'll see that again pretty recently, but this team, we're talking about this MSU team in general. I think this team is still fairly young. I know Jacoby Windman is gonna leave after this season. We'll see where Cal Holiday is in terms of NFL because I think he's only a junior. And then, MSU is going to lose um a lot of the offensive line. So I
Right.
think, you know, those are the three main points. But, depending on who the quarterback is this year, if it is Caden Hauser, then you'll have Caden Hauser another year. I think,
Right.
you lose Trey Mosley, but you'll still have the rest of that wide receiver course. So I think we'll see how this MSU team this year is and how they can grow into kind of 2024 because 2024 in terms of I think fan expectations once Mel Tucker was hired was around 2024 2025 when they start getting their act together and they start competing you know, close to the level that, D'Antonio had MSU competing during, that stretch where they were winning, 10 to 12 games a season. So
Yeah.
I think that's the fans' expectations. And I think, we talked about going back to those recruiting classes again. It's, building those two top, stacking those recruiting classes up is, gonna, in theory, gonna help you build up to that success for, this future schedule. And like you said, USC and UCLA, it's gonna change the Big Ten and the college football landscape again and it's going to make it more difficult for a team like MSU who, they're not considered a blue blood and you're bringing
No.
in another blue blood program with USC and UCLA is definitely just an attract like it is a school that has an attraction, they are a Jordan program. They're in LA, there is a lot of attraction for them on the recruiting trail. For players, I know Chip Kelly has his, own little weird way of
Yeah.
recruiting. But yeah, I mean, again, like Lincoln Riley and Chip Kelly, in their own rights are both kind of offensive masterminds. And, I think expanding the Big Ten to, the West Coast, I think it will benefit. I think it's gonna benefit, all the teams. I think, MSU having that reach out to the West Coast. I think we've already seen it, recruiting Caden Hauser. I know this previous class, they were late additions, but Jalen Barbarin and Sean Brown, both guys from California. We'll see more West Coast guys coming to MSU, but I think, you know, not trying to get off topic here, but USC and UCLA, I think where USC is dropped off compared to, a team like Michigan or Ohio State is in the trenches, and I think they're going to benefit having that recruiting reach to, the Midwest, and they might come into, a state like Michigan or Ohio where is a place that MSU and U of M and Ohio State have been getting guys out of, and a
Right.
team like USC or UCLA is kind of coming in and picking off a couple of those guys, which may affect MSU. But at the same time, MSU is going out to California and may be taking a skill player, um, or kind of a linebacker type of guy from a team like UCLA, which we might see with Dylan Williams, or some other corners or linebackers in the future. So I think it goes both ways. But yeah, it definitely is going to change, and it's definitely going to be a an uphill battle for the foreseeable future for MSU. Just in all factors. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself right now, but looking at the 2025 schedule, you do lose Ohio State to that schedule, but you
Right.
do add, getting you have to go to USC, and you host UCLA. And looking at the 2025 schedule, I mean, you still have teams like Indiana, and Northwestern, Penn State, Michigan, Iowa, Minnesota, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin. I mean, that's honestly that seems way tougher in terms of a season, or sorry, a conference schedule. I think that
Right.
seems right now a lot tougher than the conference schedule that they have this year and next year. Um, and you're not even having to play Ohio State.
Ohio State.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Who
so
who has been like if you I mean, yeah, I know, Michigan's won the last two Big Ten championships. Penn State won one in 2016, and Michigan State had their run in the early 2010s and into 2015. But if you look at the big picture, the last 2 decades, at least the last 2 decades, Ohio State's been the premier program of the Big Ten. So, yeah, to your point, you finally get Ohio State off the schedule after having play them every year in the East Division, and you get rewarded by not having to play them. But at the same time, to your point, you got to play USC on the road. You've got to go to Iowa, to Wisconsin, to Minnesota. Those are three teams that, I know the West Division has been pretty mediocre, but those three teams have been pretty good, and you got to play them on the road. You get Michigan at home, Penn State at home, UCLA at home. So yeah, I'm with you. I think the 25 schedule um, is arguably even tougher. Out of curiosity, I wanted to look at the last time Michigan State did not play Ohio State, and you've got to go all the way back to 2010, which was um, again, I think that was the first Big Ten championship for
mhm.
Mark D'Antonio, was that 2010 season. So it's been by that time it'll be almost 15 years since you've played Ohio State. It's crazy just the way the landscape has changed so rapidly in college sports. in recent years. I wanted to address this question real quick from Cameron about why wasn't Connor Cook a team captain. I have no idea, and I kind of found it funny the question just because um, Connor Cook was at Michigan State from 2011 to 2015, and I was still in college then too. So Connor Cook and I are like the same age, and so I was not yet covering the team when he was on campus, and so I don't have any idea why he wasn't a team captain. I think a lot of those decisions are made, sometimes personalities, even though you're the quarterback. Um, and I don't know Connor, and I remember I watched a lot of Michigan State during that time period, just because, again, they were at the top, battling Wisconsin and Ohio State. It seemed like every year at the top of the Big Ten. But no, I don't. We don't have any inside
I
information on that.
from what I've heard from former players, he was not the greatest teammate or friend, but
That's kind of.
that's
I
yeah.
had heard those rumblings too.
So
So
yeah,
that might
he was not the most liked guy on the team,
right. Good
for
quarterback.
various reasons, and I'll
Good
leave it at
quarterback.
that.
Maybe not the best leader. But hey, he won a couple Big Ten championships, so I know
Mhm.
he's very well respected, at least amongst the fan base. Um, yeah. So we kind of touched on the 25 schedule a little bit as well, with just the changes that are coming. What do you think of this format the Big Ten has adopted, as far as Michigan has one protected rival now, and that's Michigan. They're going to play Michigan every year, and everybody else is going to be on this like rotation. Michigan has Ohio State, and Michigan State has rivals. Iowa has three protected rivals. Penn State has zero protected rivals. So it's kind of this weird hodgepodge of different programs with different built-in, scheduling as far as protect rivals. How do you feel about that going forward for Michigan State, and then as for the conference as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure once they expanded to 16 teams how they would, format it. I didn't know if they were gonna go like into pods and do like groups of four where you have three protected games and then you kind of rotate the other kind of two pod, playing the other two pods, or how they would do it in that way. But I do like the fact that MSU, or just all the Big Ten teams do have, their rivalries protected. I'm kind of surprised actually that MSU Penn State wasn't a protected rivalry.
Yeah,
Um, because I mean, I know Penn State has their own like little thing about being unrivaled or
unrivaled.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
But but they do play for the Land Grant Trophy, which, between MSU and Penn State fans is kind of a big deal. Obviously, everyone likes to joke about how it's the best looking trophy and everything.
yeah,
So so yeah. But I mean, it's only right just to protect those. And really kind of what I'm trying to see is how they're gonna, you know, work out in terms of distance, because, you
right.
know, if you're playing USC and UCLA, you know, every year, everyone's gonna say, "Oh yeah, you do, play one of them at home and one of them on the road." But, we'll see how they adjust, because, USC might be going to Rutgers one week, and then they have to come back, and then they have to fly back to, Penn State or,
Yeah,
Indiana and stuff. So I think those long flights, I think, in a way that'll, test them and kind of their toughness, because that might give it more parity in a way where, you might be jet lagged playing a game
yeah,
at Rutgers, or, playing a game at Maryland because you flew all the way across the country. So
right.
I think we'll see how that plays out in, the next few years. But yeah, I mean, there's not really a better way, I guess, for me. I don't think there was really a alternative option that would have, worked better. I think that was kind of that's kind of just what I feel about that.
Right. So like I know when it was kind of first announced that USC and UCLA would join the Big Ten, there was this discussion about like a 3-6-6 model where every team has three protected rivals, and then the other, you just rotate the other six opponents on your 9-game schedule. And so you play everybody within a 4-year stretch, but you have those three protected rivals. I think that made sense for some teams, like for Michigan State, for instance, like your three protected rivals off the top of my head would be Michigan, probably Penn State because of land grant, and then maybe Indiana because of the old brass spittoon, and that kind of balances out. Like Michigan and Penn State are going to be tough every year, but then no offense to Indiana, but that's kind of a lesser opponent that Michigan State is expected to beat on a regular basis. So, but what do you do for USC and UCLA because they have no natural rivals other than themselves, and so
Hmm.
who are their other two yearly opponent's going to be and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So overall, I like it. I also think that realignment's not done. There's been a lot of buzz about Washington and Oregon potentially coming over to the Big Ten, and that kind of helps balance the regional aspect of it a little bit. When we expand to a 12-team playoff in 2024 as opposed to the 4-team, right now that's going to have an impact too. Um, the thing that disappoints me, just as a purist when it comes to college sports, is just that um, I like the regional nature of college sports. And I know it wasn't a perfect, like there's no such thing as the perfect system, but I liked the West Coast battling themselves to be the best team in the West Coast, and then the Big Ten you have like the best of the Midwest, and then in the SEC the best of the Southeast. Big 12 was kind of that Southwest area. I do miss that, and it's getting to the point where um, like there's the Big Ten and the SEC who have kind of are going to separate themselves from the rest of the country, and like winning a Big Ten championship is going to become so difficult. Like it's going to be
Right.
easier. It's going to be much easier to make the 12-team playoff than it is to win a Big Ten championship. Like that's
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like there's two teams that are going to play for the Big Ten title every year, and yet you're going to have I think 6 at-large bids that teams are going to battle for in this 12-team playoff. So um, yeah, I think that's unfortunate because not that teams like Minnesota or um, Iowa hasn't won a Big Ten championship in football since '04, I don't think. So not that those teams were positioned to routinely compete for Big Ten titles anyway, but you've made it virtually impossible now for a
Yeah.
team like that to win a Big Ten championship, and I think that's unfortunate. But again, that's just kind of a personal preference thing. Um, well, we went longer than I anticipated we were going to go tonight. Again, I thank everybody for tuning in. We are going to kind of call it a night here. We wanted to do this because it has been a while since we've done a pod. June is such a huge and important recruiting month. And that makes it like a worthy month. But at the same time, I think all of us are kind of itching to get back onto the field and watch some actual games again. We're chomping at the bit for that. We can't wait to be back at Spartan Stadium this fall. But in the meantime, we do appreciate the support that you guys have shown throughout the summer and the off season. It's funny, we kind of launched this podcast in the heart of the off season, which is it's a strange time to launch, but hopefully we've kind of started to develop a little bit of a base. And then once the season gets here, that'll be established, and maybe we can add some more subscribers and things like that, and grow our audience a little bit. But we do appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.